Sonic Adventure 2 is the best game of all time, and Sonic Adventure 2 is the worst game of all time. Two conflicting statements I've heard genuinely expressed by randos who like to argue on Twitter. Two conflicting statements that I agree with. How can that be, I hear my introductory paragraph asking? A game can't be the best and worst of all time. I understand why that might be tricky to comprehend, but that dissonance is inherent to understanding a game like Sonic Adventure 2 and discussing it with a critical lens. Sonic Adventure 2 is a polarizing title. Everyone I've ever talked to about it falls into one of the aforementioned camps or the other, but as with all polarizing games, I think the truth is nuanced and complicated. While we're going to get into my personal opinions about the game, they're almost irrelevant to the greater point I'm trying to make with this video. The idea that understanding Sonic Adventure 2 and having a well-rounded conversation about it requires a lot of thoughtful consideration. In my view, it's the perfect game to teach gaming criticism with because of how it oscillates between being the messiest game you've ever played and a tight package that delivers what I'm told the kids are calling peak gaming. Sonic Adventure 2 is a remarkable teaching tool for media literacy that should be taught in schools all over the world alongside its literary companions like Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov, Lorraine Hansberry's A Raisin in the Sun, and Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men. It makes the player ask crucial questions like, can a game be amazing if it's also terrible? How does personal taste conflict with contextual truth? And why did they make Rouge the Bat look like that? I mean, I can't be the only one she was an awakening for, right? You know what? Actually, I think I want to cut that. Let's talk about objectivity for a second. As much as we all try to be reasonable, well-adjusted people, well, I do. There's no telling what kind of stuff you're into. It is quite literally impossible for objectivity in gaming criticism to exist, since we all view the world through our own inherently subjective lenses. That's why I start hearing alarm bells go off in my brain whenever people talk about games and use the phrase like, X game is objectively bad, because no, it isn't. Good and bad are both subjective ideas. For whatever reason though, Sonic Adventure 2 causes people to start throwing around objectively good and bad. It's not even just gaming fans either. I've caught a handful of writers I respect saying things like the design of Sonic Adventure 2 is objectively bad. To me, what language like that does is attempt to put a person's taste into a rigid category of either right or wrong. It says if you like, or maybe don't like, Sonic Adventure 2, your taste in games is bad, and that's proven by science. I'm here to set you free from those rigid confinements and help you understand, no matter if you're in the Sonic Adventure 2 broke into my house and cut my dog in half camp, or the Sonic Adventure 2 has never done a single thing wrong in its life camp, that you're both right and wrong about the game at the same time, but there's nothing objective about it. Let me show you how that's possible. Let's start by talking about the game for just a little bit. Sonic Adventure 2 starts with one of the best opening levels maybe in any game ever. City Escape is badass. It starts with Sonic snowboarding down the streets of fictional San Francisco on a piece of a helicopter he just jumped out of, while one of the most memorable ska punk songs in all of gaming plays in the background. What a way to fucking start, huh? The entire level is well designed. There's this palpable energy radiating out of your TV screen as Sonic runs from the cops. There isn't even much tutorial junk in this level. Sonic Adventure 2 knows that you know what you're doing. You're here to run fast, and it's going to egg you on. City Escape starts the game off on the right foot by putting that foot on the gas pedal and pushing it all the way to the floor. All killer, no filler, straight gas. The level is so good, it has the power to rewrite DNA. It did for me. It ignited my love for punk rock and electric guitars, made me want to learn how to skateboard and do parkour. It's lightning in my veins. Still, all these years later, I just replayed it for the capture for this video. It's incredible. How can anyone say that Sonic Adventure 2 is the worst game of all time when it has City Escape in it? When I said that Sonic Adventure 2 starts with its best foot forward with City Escape, that's only a half-truth. You see, the game is split into two discrete campaigns, a hero story that follows Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and a villain story that follows Shadow, Eggman, and Rouge. The player has the choice to start with whichever campaign they like, and if you choose the dark story first, you'll be treated to Iron Gate, a level where you play as Eggman in his mech suit as you shoot your way through a prison in search of Shadow. On paper, that sounds pretty good, But in execution, it's a very different opening than City Escape. The level is full of barriers. You ride 2 slowly descending elevators while you shoot at stuff that doesn't even have the ability to shoot you back. Doors close and lock in front of you at every turn. It's not terrible, but it's not good. Every time I replay Sonic Adventure 2, I ask myself, how does the dark story start again? Ah, fuck, I forgot about this. That's a feeling that persists for about 75% of all the levels in the game. Levels full of janky platforming, terrible camera work, and busted physics. There are plenty of maddening design choices littered throughout Sonic Adventure 2. The Emerald Hunt missions require you to keep a lookout for pieces of the Master Emerald, but this is how the camera reacts when you go into just about any small, confined space during your search. Knuckles and Rouge are, weirdly enough, the fastest characters in the game, but because they're usually in the smallest environments, they feel impossible to control and get the camera stuck on everything. The Eggman and Tails levels are pretty boring across the board since they don't really introduce a whole lot of new mechanics and don't do much of anything with the base abilities that the 2 characters have. Something the mech levels love doing, though, is precision platforming. Unfortunately, both characters feel like a nightmare to control and are often asked to land on small platforms over instant death pits. This is me, a 26-year-old man, getting a genuine game over in a Tails level because of the platforming. I beat Sekiro in Lies of P. Why did they make it this hard? As I was watching this back, I do want to point out that I'm not saying that there's no fun to be had in the Eggman Tails levels. I've seen a few creators try and say that, and I just don't think that's true. It's always super fun to line up a bunch of enemies and blow them all up at once, and some levels like Mission Street and Cosmic Wall are good, but by and large, they all seem to kind of struggle to find interesting ways to push the mechanics, so they just revert to platforming that feels kind of cheap since Tails and Eggman aren't as nimble as the rest of the cast. Anyway, this level, Mad Space, is probably the lowest point of the game. It's an Emerald Hunt as Rouge, where you explore a handful of small celestial bodies floating in space, each with their own gravity. Obviously, it reminds me of Mario Galaxy, but while that game used its planet-based level design to create interesting platforming sequences, Mad Space is full of horrific physics oversights, terrible camera angles, and a general air of frustration. If City Escape is as close to objectively good as any video game level can get, Mad Space is as close to objectively bad, and what's unfortunate is that, in my view, the vast majority of the levels in Sonic Adventure 2 are much closer to Mad Space's quality than City Escape's. The boss fights are similarly uneven. Most of the time, the game just plops you in a small arena with a character from the campaign opposite to the one you're playing and says, beat him up, without much consideration for the abilities that each character has. For example, the Sonic levels in the game are all about putting your foot on the gas and doing fun bits of platforming, but instead of using those skills for a fight, you're put in a cramped arena with Shadow and you're just supposed to use your homing attack at him until he dies. The same thing happens with the first boss fight in the Hero campaign, where you fight a guy in a giant mech suit, but the space is just so tiny and restrictive for it to be any fun. Shadow faces off against the same mech suit guy at the start of the Dark campaign, but in a much bigger arena, and the fight feels a million times better. You're able to really just gun it away from the boss's attacks in a way that feels good because you're making use of Shadow's abilities and not coming to a screeching halt when you run into an invisible wall. It's not all bad. The best boss in the game is King Boom Boo, a giant ghost. Yeah, ghosts apparently are real in the Sonic universe, that you fight as Knuckles. To win the fight, you need to avoid the boss until you can hit a switch that opens the windows, letting sunlight in. The ghost sinks into the ground, and you need to dig into the area where the ghost is hiding to kick it out into the open. Then, the game of cat and mouse switches so that you're chasing the ghost trying to hit its weakened physical form before the time runs out and the windows all close again. It's really, really good because it feels like a comprehensive test of all the skills you've been practicing as Knuckles up until this point. What's so disappointing though is that there aren't really any other truly excellent fights as any of the other characters. I think the Egg Golem fight as Sonic and the Bio Lizard fight as Shadow are both pretty good because, like with the King Boom Boo fight, you have to use your skills in a higher stakes context, but other than that, the rest of the fights are pretty awful. Like when you fight Knuckles as Rouge, or the other way around if you're playing the hero story, you just fucking kick him until he dies. There isn't much, if any, thoughtful design that went into that sequence. Same goes with the fights between Tails and Eggman and Sonic and Shadow. This isn't a review of Sonic Adventure 2 though, so what am I trying to say here? I'm trying to show you that the game is an extremely mixed bag of horrible lows and incredible highs. The Dark story starts off with two of Eggman's worst levels and a forgettable Emerald Hunt as Rouge, and just as you start to say, you know what, maybe I'll play something else, you get hit with the first and arguably best Shadow level, Radical Highway. It's a game of extremes that's totally fucking cool and mind-numbingly dull at the same time. And I think that's what makes it so useful as a tool for understanding criticism. How can you even begin to unpack all of that if you're asked if Sonic Adventure 2 is a good game? If you were to ask me, I'd say, yeah? But an answer like that feels like it does a disservice to a banger level like City Escape or Metal Harbor, while also giving too much credit to the absolute garbage of Mad Space, Hidden Base, and Aquatic Mine. It's a game that requires a real conversation to fully understand and can't just be boiled down to game good or game bad. With how glaringly obvious Sonic Adventure 2's flaws and successes are, it makes having an empathetic conversation really easy in my opinion. So what do I mean by that? Just a second ago we talked about if I think Sonic Adventure 2 is a good game. Ultimately, my answer is yes, with like a million asterisks. But if someone were to disagree with me, I can absolutely understand their position. For some people, the jagged edges of the game just cut too deep for any of the good parts to be enjoyable. How can I enjoy a game that feels like it wants to waste my time with platforming sections like these, they ask. One of the stances I voiced earlier was, how can a game with a level like City Escape in it ever be seen as the worst game of all time? But that perspective is easily flipped. How can a game with this Eggman Tails boss fight ever be seen as the best of all time? So here's the part of that I think is the most difficult to fully comprehend and accept. Who's right? As we've already talked about, both people, but I want to distance us from the idea that you can be right or wrong about your opinion, because then we start to wander back towards the idea of objectivity again. By and large, there's no right or wrong way to view things. That's not to say that there aren't general principles in gaming that we all sort of agree on, like the idea that a high-quality game should run well on its hardware, but there's nuance to everything. As frustrating as that might sound for anyone looking to be told that they're objectively right about their Sonic opinions, that, unfortunately, just can't happen in any mature conversation about games. Welcome to the birth of critical nuance. In order to fully understand and engage with game criticism, we have to accept that all opinions on the game are valid. That doesn't mean that all opinions are good critiques of a game and should be given similar weight, but it's still important to recognize that they exist and that people can have them. For example, I've seen people critique Sonic Adventure 2 for its ridiculous highway loop-de-loops in the Shadow level Radical Highway. This game is so stupid, how could a car even drive on that? Someone might say. I don't know why I made him sound like the Costco guy. And yeah, a car can't drive on that, but you're also playing as a hedgehog wearing rocket boots. An attempt to criticize this game for being unrealistic is kind of defeating the point of playing the game at all. This isn't The Last of Us. Sonic Adventure 2 isn't trying to convince you that these events could all happen in our world. It's a game about ska music and dunking on robots, which I guess could happen if we put on some Less Than Jake and found me a Roomba, but you know what I mean. So is the critique about the loop-de-loops invalid? No. As we said, it's true, and someone can certainly hold that opinion, but if that's the sort of thing they're leading with as a critique against the game, then I'm not really convinced the rest of their argument is going to be particularly good. It goes in the opposite direction as well. I haven't really touched on the story here, but let me just summarize and say that the story in Sonic Adventure 2 is largely terrible and the writing is almost nonsensical. A character will often say something to another character and they'll respond with a completely different idea, like no one's actually listening to anyone. It's bizarre.
Why are you so upset? Well, that was really impressive. You've managed to create complete havoc on the whole planet. Does this now mean we control the planet and can do as we choose?
At this rate, the cannon will take too much time to charge up. If you want to unleash its full potential, you'll need all 7 Chaos Emeralds.
Where in the world have you been?
Someone might say that the writing is good because the game is made for children, so it's not meant to be some great piece of fiction. To me, that kind of argument in Sonic Adventure 2's favor is just as flimsy as the loop-de-loop thing. Just because something is for children doesn't mean that quality doesn't exist. Are you honestly trying to tell me that Avatar: The Last Airbender's spectacular writing doesn't affect its overall quality as a show? People are certainly welcome to believe that the writing in the game doesn't matter since it's for kids, but that doesn't make for a compelling argument in the game's favor. These arguments are both the equivalent of complaining about a game's story because the characters didn't do the exact thing you would have done, or saying that Spider-Man 2 is the best game of all time because it has Spider-Man in it.
Ah! This is the greatest game of all time. Oh my god! Oh my god! This is the greatest game in human history!
In a vacuum, these critiques seem silly, but you'd be surprised at just how many people talk about games in this way. In my experience, a lot of the conversation surrounding Sonic Adventure 2 is made up of these smaller, nitpick-sized arguments. It doesn't make sense that the sidewalk connects to the side of a building. The Knuckles levels are all good simply because I like Knuckles. This is no way to examine and critique art, especially a piece of art that's so easily critiquable. If you want to truly understand a work, a game, then you need to take in its good and bad together in a way that makes for a genuine conversation and critique. It's okay to like Sonic Adventure 2 and also recognize that it has some bits that are just flat out terrible. Loving something doesn't always mean that it has to be perfect. Similarly, it's equally as good to hate Sonic Adventure 2 while also giving props to some of its more stellar levels and soundtrack. This is the first step of learning how to be a good games critic, being able to weigh every part of an experience and make critiques of it within the context of the game that surrounds it without resorting to needless nitpicking or unquestioning praise. But let's just pretend that you watching this aren't an aspiring critic. I have no idea why you wouldn't want to be one. I get fat checks from Ubisoft all the time to give their games 7 out of 10s, apparently. But let's just say that you don't care about writing reviews. So why should you care about any of this? Well, because reading a review for a game you care about and writing one yourself are actually very comparable experiences. When you're reading a review for a game you like, you'll likely encounter critiques that you don't fully agree with. But what has Sonic Adventure 2 taught us how to do? It's been a lesson in weighing the good with the bad and understanding that two people can walk away from a game feeling completely differently about it based on the things that stand out to them. For me, City Escape and the Chow Garden and the absolute banger of a final boss are enough for me to give the game a recommendation, but Mad Space, the rest of the boss fights, and the nonsensical story can certainly be enough for someone to not care how good any of my things are. So here's the deal. The unfortunate thing is that, as I mentioned before, Sonic Adventure 2's highs and lows are really obvious, which makes understanding a reviewer's perspective on the game pretty easy. But it's something of an outlier. That's why I said it's a great learning tool for media literacy, because it's relatively simple to understand both sides of. This is not going to be the case for most other games. Extreme highs and lows like the ones found in Sonic Adventure 2 don't come around all that often, so we have to take the skills we've learned from discussing the game and apply them to other conversations about other games with much more nuance. Take Eurogamer's 3 out of 5 review of the Elden Ring DLC, Shadow of the Erd Tree. A lot of people disagree with a lot of what's said in this review, but as is the case with all good reviews, the author makes a great case for the reader to see where they're coming from. If you were a big fan of Shadow of the Erd Tree, let go of that impulse to say, well, I like it, so it's good, when the review talks about the vast empty spaces in the open world, and take a moment to consider if the reviewer makes a compelling case for why those empty spaces might not have worked for them. Maybe it didn't bother you. Maybe those big empty spaces are the same as the kart racing level as Tails, something that didn't bother you per se, but certainly not something you need to defend to your last dying breath. We can learn so much about art criticism from a game like Sonic Adventure 2 because of how messy it is. It's a really spectacular tool for learning how to have honest and balanced conversations about games, as long as everyone who's going to talk is willing to see the other perspective. Like I said, Sonic makes it easy to see why it's great, but also equally easy to see why it sucks pretty hard. By being able to understand nuance after learning the basics with Sonic and Friends, we can then apply that knowledge to literally every other gaming conversation like we just did with Shadow of the Erd Tree. I mentioned before how the game ignited a love for electric guitars and whatever else inside of me when I was young, which is true, but it also taught me to have thoughtful and nuanced conversations about games. In a time when it feels like everything needs to be the second coming of video game Jesus or the absolute worst game ever released, I think these sorts of conversations are important. Sonic Adventure 2 is too complicated and interesting to be reduced to simple Twitter conversations saying it's objectively good or bad. It's not either of those things. It can't be. I think we all owe it to ourselves to have more thoughtful conversations than that. So I'll start one for the comment section below. Why does Rouge the Bat right? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Live and learn, like and subscribe.